Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Ibrahim El-Amin. My co-host, Faridah Brown, is traveling at the moment and unable to join us this morning, but we look forward to having her back on our next episode of Living in the Most Serious Times. As always, I am joined by our guest, Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed. He is Muslim American leader and successor of Imam W.D. Muhammad. And the nature of this conversation is to provide a Muslim American perspective on a host of issues of both international and national importance. Before we get into today's conversation, we would like to make a brief announcement. On Saturday, July 5th, in the city of Rochester, New York, the home of the late, great Frederick Douglass, Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed will give his annual Independence Day address, Muslim American Independence Day address. It is a commemoration, of course, of the work of Frederick Douglass, as well as his famous address, "What to the American Slave is the 4th of July." And we'll throw the flyer up on the screen right here, right quick. The topic of his address is the commencement of America, dawning of the just order. It will be held at the Memorial Art Gallery at 12 noon. Attendance is free and open to the public. So we welcome everyone to come. This is not an event that is catered just to Muslims or African Americans. It is a message that we want to give to all concerned citizens of these United States. Brother Imam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, we appreciate the time that you take to set aside and participate in these conversations. I was speaking with a friend a couple of days ago, and we were noting that and looking at the present international situation, which kind of pressing in the news, the situation in Israel, the war in Gaza. And one of the things that we noted was that the circumstances have been dire for the Palestinian people for a number of years. But at this particular point in their experience, in their sojourn as a people, there seems to be a greater sensitivity in the minds and the hearts of the American public for their circumstances and addressing their issue. And this is in stark contrast to what has generally been the disposition of the American people. What would you say has contributed to this greater sensitivity, greater awareness of their circumstances in the minds of the American public, and what should the American public be thoughtful about, in particular young people be thoughtful about, in terms of giving their support to the Palestinian people and their condemnation of the behavior and the disposition of the Israeli war government?
Yes, thank you very much. I don't think that there's any more important question or important concern for world publics in terms of what is due as recognition to human worth and dignity than the situation of the Palestinian people. American history and the American people have been shaped largely by the question of human life in its proper value. It seems a conflict that America, with what it claims for itself in its founding documents, that it would even have a civil rights movement or even maybe a human rights movement or a freedom movement. It seems to be a conflict that such history exists in America, but it does. And because of that history, American people have been shaped, profoundly influenced by the struggle for freedom, freedom in the connection to a sacred property belonging to mankind, that God has endowed mankind with, to realize for himself and herself the life and um, existence that God intends. So America is not in its universal international character, except that it is associated with that struggle. So I believe, as our late leader, he also believed this, that the American people, the people, the citizens, not always the government, and certainly not what we're witnessing in this government presently, but the American people are innocent, largely innocent people, innocent in their spirituality, um, innocent in their goodness. And because of that, there is a blessing on the American people. And also the recognitions of American society owing its possibilities to a God is, in our estimation, as a people of faith, a condition for God's favor and God's blessing. So in this case, the favor of God is in the conscience of the American people. And I don't think that it's just a sympathy for the cause of the Palestinians as such, but it's a recognition in the, if we can use this term and it can be accepted in political expression. Not that we are political leaders, but the world is also influenced by political concerns and political language. The soul of the American people is sensitive to abuses, to the human existence and the human condition. No people on the earth more symbolize the state of the victimization, assault on the dignity of humans than in this time, than in my estimation, than the Palestinian people. And it is a test in the life of man. It is a test in the leadership of this world governments and their leaders, in the way that they approach and address the Palestinian people. Our government is sadly, presently, in its administration, the present administration, not all members in the government, but in the present administration of the White House, is not reflecting that sensitivity. And American people are not accepting, in my opinion, of that neglect. I saw recently where the State Department is sanctioning judges on the World Court, judges that came to a conclusion that arrest warrants should be issued for the aggressors in this assault against the Palestinian people for crimes against humanity. And this White House administration, as reflected in the State Department and the Secretary of State, announced that they were issuing some economic sanctions against those judges, which it's not a question of the economic sanctions. It's a question of the immoral neglect of the righteous and dignified interests and cause of the Palestinian people. And those institutions in the world that are properly addressing their condition. So for the American government, as represented by this administration, to not support that is not a reflection of the innocence of the American people. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and other of the world's faiths, and the leadership that is associated with those faith communities, I have seen, as they are represented in America, a concern, and a deep one, for the necessity to support the interests of the Palestinian people. So I think that this is, as you have stated and hinted in your question, that this is a movement in the spirit and in the soul of humanity. And even I saw a person who is not associated with faith in God, but associated with the forming of political language to support the freedom struggle of the African American people, but not coming from spirituality, but a person who's well known in the struggle of African American people to be acknowledged as human. And she's kind of an iconic figure, Angela Davis. She's a professor of, I think, political science in one of the large universities in the state of California. And I saw in an interview that she gave recently that she said that the struggle of the Palestinian people and their determination, this is my language, and the language of Imam W. Muhammad, our late leader, to refer to it as a determination, is the moral test of mankind presently. So I thought that was very significant coming from her, and a clear indication that this assault on the dignity of a human community has manifest and dawned in the spirit of wide-ranging and diverse groups within the public of America.
You use the language sacred property in referring to in your the answer that you provided. It's language that you've used elsewhere in describing this assault that has been taking place on the Palestinian people. That uh, war is being waged against their sacred property as human beings. Can you expound upon that and perhaps explain what that language means for members of our audience who are not familiar with that terminology?
Sacred property. By birth, all human beings are within a shared common honor. And that honor, as is given in our holy book in the Quran, the holy book of Muslims, God says that every descendant of Adam, of the first human, is honorable. So this honor is inherited. And we think of resources, property, real property, or tangible property as wealth to be inherited. And it can be a symbolic reference, but the earth itself and the resources associated with the earth, human life is derived from it. And human life is, I would say, the intelligent or evolved form that the earth produces. So the intelligence of the earth itself is human life. But everything that is in the earth, and I would extend that to everything that is created, is belonging to support of the dignity of human life. This is the teaching in Islam, that God has ordered the universe, if we want to put it like that, to yield its purpose and service to the progress of human life. So everything that exists is belonging to this category of a shared property. And because it serves the purpose for which God has created human life and created everything that supports human life, and we put that in the category of a sanctity or sacredness, then it's logical to refer to it as a sacred property. And as I've said, these recognitions are in our holy book and in the teachings of Muhammad the Prophet. He said that the life of the Muslim is sacred, and the property of the Muslim is sacred, and the honor of the Muslim is sacred. And his reference to Muslim is the common identity of human life as God intended. It's not just referring to a religious identity, but the created dignity of man. If we were to give it a term that Islam projects or promotes, that term is Muslim. So it's in our teaching, in the teaching of Muhammad the Prophet, and as I've already mentioned, in the Quran itself, and God says that everything that He has created good, with worth, with value. And the founders of the United States of America, they borrowed from this language in the Quran. Many people might not be familiar, but this language was borrowed from the Quran itself. There's evidence, strong evidence, that the authors of the important documents that shape American society, the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and even documents that preceded, that the authors of those documents, they were familiar with, has some general and even specific familiarity with Islamic teaching with the holy book, the Quran. Thomas Jefferson is known to have had a copy of the Quran, and also references from persons like Benjamin Franklin to Islamic teaching, and that Islamic teaching would not be something rejected in America. He said that. I'm paraphrasing, giving it in my words, but he was quoted as saying something very similar to that. So within these documents is also a recognition of a shared property, a sacred property, that God has endowed man with inalienable, that which cannot be separated from the dignity of human life, that no law or no government can separate human life from these particular recognitions. And inalienable suggests inviolable or sacred. The term for sacred in the Quran language is haram, sacred, meaning that that which is oppressive or prohibitive is not accepted, is not acceptable. So the term inalienable refers to sanctity. And the Declaration of Independence says that the life is sacred, freedom, liberty is sacred, and the pursuit that is supported by potential to realize resources to support the movement for human establishment is also sacred.
Thank you. Um, in light of the explanation that you've given, and just looking at the present circumstances there in Gaza, the what is at stake is very, very clear. And my question is, even though we are noticing a change in the disposition of the American people toward the circumstances there, it seems to me from what I'm able to observe, and I'm sure that others will have share the same opinion, that when you look at, in particular, Muslim leadership in the United States, as well as the traditional African American leadership, there hasn't been a consistent voice in terms of addressing the issue there in Gaza, despite all of the public attention that is presently being focused on it. These two institutions of leadership have at times seemed to give, in the case of Muslim leadership, kind of conflicting messages or messages that aren't clear, or perhaps even in some cases a little desperate. What would you say accounts for the lack of a consistent, coherent voice, aside from your own, on this particular issue, coming from groups that you would think would be especially sensitive and especially thoughtful with regard to the plight of the Palestinian people?
It's a very important question, fair question. Um, I've looked at the leaders in the Muslim world, the political leaders, as they have addressed this situation, and I see in them deep concern. I'm thinking of some. I don't want to name them, but I'm thinking of some right now as I'm answering your question, and I see the concern in their face as they address the question that is heavy in their spirit and on their minds. So I don't think that it's uh, in them a absence of the weight of the matter, and I don't think it's in them that they're not committed to supporting the determination of the Palestinian people. I think that it is a political accommodation because of the power and reach and the influence of America and the, I guess, chokehold is fair that some minority elements in the war machine Israel has on America's influence in the world. And I saw a representative of Saudi Arabia representing the government of Saudi Arabia addressing the United Nations recently that I was very proud as a Muslim to see coming from them in a very thorough assessment of the situation and I would say deeply influenced by Islamic values. Though the person, the representative ambassador, I think it was, he didn't come directly from the Quran in terms of quoting the Quran or Muhammad, the prophet, but certainly the sentiments that he expressed were coming from Islamic teaching, and any Muslim, informed Muslim observing it would have come to that conclusion. So I was very proud to see that. But there is the reality of the world where America has a kind of reach that can't be disregarded. And there is a strange power that the Israeli war machine, I would say devilish government in the hands of its leader and the supporters of that leadership, strange influence that it has on America's power in the world and America's reach in the world. So I think that Muslim world leadership doesn't know how to address the conditions of a strained relationship with America because of a strong and committed support of the Palestinian determination. One important observation that this ambassador from Saudi Arabia mentioned in his address was the failure of military options with regard to addressing the cause of the Palestinians. And I agree with that. Any military option is clearly one-sided. The Palestinian people, they have no real defense in terms of military defense. They have only the innocence of their existence as human beings. That's their defense, and that is the strongest defense, is a moral defense. But to engage the war machine, and war machine is a real assessment, Israel and its military capabilities as supported by America um, is difficult to defeat. So, acknowledgement of that is an important development, which opens the door for the strongest support that can come to an oppressed people, and that is the moral support of mankind on the earth. Now, you would think that the African American Christian leadership, with its history in America, would be at the forefront of that concern. The voice and the face of the movement to recognize and to acknowledge and support human dignity was once the African American people. So it is a great failure on the part of African American Christian leadership, in my opinion, and also um, Muslim leadership, in the sense that it has not registered the moral obligation that characterizes the public message of Islam. I'm not pleased at all with particularly African American Muslim leadership. I'm not pleased at all with the ignorance in the leaders and the neglect with regard to this concern, especially with the example that was provided for many decades of the late leader Imam W. Mohammed. So, it's disappointing and hurtful, but nevertheless, we are determined to give what we can give as Islam requires that of us, as conscience requires that of us. Give our voices, give our attention, give our hearts, give our resources to support of the interests, dignity, hopes, aspirations, establishment that is characterized as a determination of the Palestinian people. There is no more important concern, not even the concern for our own movement of establishment in America, because we will be violating and making ourselves look like hypocrites if we were working for our own establishment and not acknowledging the importance of the determination of the Palestinian cause. Our establishment is a moral establishment. So any interest to secure moral establishment is our concern and is a requirement for us in terms of attention and support.
We have a host of issues that we would like to, questions and topics that we would like to get to. But one last question on this, your answer that you just gave now. Why do you categorize the Palestinian determination and their circumstances of being such central importance? I'm sure that there might be many in the African American community and even in the Muslim African American community, or people who associate with the history of the Muslim African American community, which goes back nearly 100 years, who would say, well, we give too much attention to the concerns of Muslim populations internationally and not enough to our own particular circumstances and our own particular set of challenges, what would you say to them, and why what is it particularly about the Palestinian determination that makes it such a central focus for this matter with regard to human freedom and human dignity that you have identified?
For Muslims, the shrine at Jerusalem, and in the language of Islam and the Arabic speaking world, El-Quds, which means the holy, the holy. Um, there is a responsibility that comes from divine influence that obligates us to orient ourselves in the direction of that shrine. And in the history of Islam, Muhammad the Prophet, when he sensed that the Islamic message was not in conflict with the sanctity of all divine, divinely inspired messages, that which was associated with the messengers of God preceding him, even before that kind of understanding was revealed to him, he sensed it. And he thought it proper to focus Jerusalem as an orientation for prayer. Later, that was an adjustment was made, and the adjustment was that even more fundamental than an orientation toward Jerusalem was an orientation toward the house at Mecca, which was established by Abraham and his son Ishmael. That orientation is more fundamental than even the orientation at Jerusalem. But once you make and embrace an understanding of the orientation at the house at Mecca, and understand that it is intended to be a condition, recognition of a condition that God wants for mankind on the earth, then once you have established yourself in that, seeing that properly, then it extends to every human community. And so another approach to Jerusalem is warranted. And this is what is seen in the history of our Islamic life, that Muhammad the Prophet, he ascended, and I don't know that everyone can appreciate these teachings because they're heavy with spiritual understanding and the need for interpretation. But if we can offer some language to help understand these things, Prophet Muhammad ascended upon recognition of the value of human life. And he was taken again to Jerusalem. He had already focused Jerusalem, but he was taken to Jerusalem. And another assessment of Jerusalem is made in the context of this ascension upon the recognition of the dignity of man. And in that ascension, he greets and is becomes acquainted with major figures in the movement of human establishment, beginning with Adam, the human prototype, the first human. And it continues and it progresses until he reaches the highest point where he is meeting Abraham. So, meeting Abraham is also connected to the establishment of the house at Mecca. But this occurrence takes place in ascension in Jerusalem. So, the movement for the dignity of man, the movement for the expression of political ideology, social ideology, cultural ideology, educational systems, the use of intelligent language, even economic philosophy, everything that is associated with establishment of human community is connected to the shrine at Jerusalem. And the people associated with that are the Palestinian people. So everyone is not appreciating the way of God. People in ignorance will question God, and they're not seeing the plan of God. We can see something that hurts our hearts and our spirits and even hurts our minds. And we can't fathom that a just and merciful God would permit such things. But this is of the limitations of the human mind. That God might permit a troubled condition so that we focus that condition with the spirit that we know supports the dignity that we share. And in terms of Islamic teaching, it is clear that as we acknowledge the importance of the shrine at Jerusalem in its orientation for us for establishment of human life on the earth, in all of the most important concerns that a people who have been shut out of, restricted, oppressed, repulsed, rejected, require our attention and support on a level that indicates that it is a universal concern. And to address it with those people in their state is also to address the moral concern of any people that is suffering that condition. Now, Christians, they can understand this concept. If they can say that Jesus Christ, peace be on the prophet, and this is not Islamic teaching, this is from Christianity, that his example is, and his suffering is in the interest of mankind. And attention to embracing his example is associated with salvation for mankind. Then certainly we can see a whole people as the example of what is necessary to support for the establishment of mankind as God intended. The African American people were once that people. And in some ways, many ways, We are still that people. But the requirement on us presently, if we think of ourselves in that context, is to focus and put the proper attention and support with those that have the moral claim. And the veracity of our claim will fall short if we don't embrace their claim.
Thank you. We could go. I could go on with more questions on that, but we have a limited amount of time, and there's some other topics that we would like to get to before we reach the end of our time here. There has been much discussion in the media as well as uh, scholars of American history and the founding of this country, this society. Much discussion regarding its present circumstances, and the language identifies our circumstances as being confronted with existential threats to the democracy, to the republic, to the foundations of the society. And they often point to the disposition and the policies of the present administration as being a major contributor to this concern or to this existential threat. I believe it was the Cato Institute that recently conducted some research, and the research indicated that nearly half of Americans of a particular age, I think the term they used was Gen Z Americans, held a overwhelmingly or predominantly negative view of the founding fathers as opposed to a positive view. And the we could go on, and it's well covered the transgressions and the uh, really, how could I say, unsavory disposition of the present administration. However, it seems to me that in light of this concern for the continuity of American society, that if you have a large segment of the next generation of Americans viewing the founders of the country in a very, very negative way, that poses an equal concern for us as a society, as a country, in terms of America uh, continuing. What would you say contributes to or has contributed to this change in disposition in the minds of a segment of the American population with regard to the founding fathers and the men who are responsible for crafting the Constitution?
Well, I can't identify one thing. Um, there are many, all belonging to the strategy on the part of an enemy to man's life that finds shelter in permissive style freedom. And corruption of the idea of freedom is of the authorship of the enemy of man. And um, I can understand a sharp critique of the founders, given the conflict of claim to these high ideals and the treatment of the African people, people brought here as slaves. And no one has a better perspective and language to condemn that than the leadership that I'm associated with, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam that precedes the leadership of Imam Din Muhammad and my leadership presently. I don't know that the ministers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, among them Malcolm X, that there were any more articulate spokespersons condemning America in its hypocrisy. So that's in our memory, and that's a part of who we are as a people, a Muslim American people, or Muslim African American people. So that's present in me, but it is disciplined and tapered by the important sacred recognitions that were written into American life by those founding documents and the authors of those documents. What I have said to you today, and as I represent our leadership tradition and our perspective, is not as well known as it should be presently. And I think that if the American people and young people hear our representation of these concerns, that they'll reconsider. Because who is going to argue with our social tradition? Anyone knowing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, anyone knowing of Malcolm X, anyone knowing of our history as a community and how we have evolved, how we positioned ourselves as outside of America, condemning America, not being associated with anything that American society was inviting to, and then repositioning ourselves by way of the influence of the teaching of Muhammad the Prophet in the leadership of Imam Din Muhammad. Who is going to argue with us and our credibility? We are the most articulate representatives of that kind of movement that ever existed in American society. So I believe that in part, the importance of my leadership presently is to articulate these concerns and articulate these things in the way that I have, and be in this time an influence in the psyche of the American people to see these things with the proper balance. And in that way, I believe that the Muslim African American leadership is an essential concern and an essential point of view in the context of the discussion of the salvation of the democracy. I don't believe, just as America was in trouble with its hypocritical conflict in the time of slavery and produced from the American condition and the American soul was a Frederick Douglass, who was championing human interests in the context of the claim of the American people and in the plight of the African American people. That intellect, that inspired intellect was produced, and America could position itself for its future because of his articulation of that conflict and what should be the position of the American people generally and the African American people in particular. Just as that was a necessary component for America to reestablish itself. We are, in this present moment, a necessary component.
Yes, sir. That leads us into we're coming to the end of our time here, but I think that's a perfect lead in to give a little bit of discussion to our upcoming event that we have in Rochester, New York, the annual Independence Day address that you'll be giving at the Memorial Art Gallery. If you could, just briefly, before we close out, give us some history with regard to this program, what Frederick Douglass, how the Muslim American, what the Muslim American perspective is on Frederick Douglass, and perhaps some indications as to what you'll address with this topic, the commencement of America.
Yes, the founders of the first teachers of the Nation of Islam, Mr. W.D. Farad, and much is necessary for us to discuss when it comes to him and who he is. And that discussion is built upon those that were invited to understand the purpose of the Nation of Islam. Everyone wasn't invited into the leadership of the Nation of Islam, but certainly Imam W.D. Muhammad was invited by Mr. Farad himself. And if someone wants to question that, they can write to our office and I'll give them a response of how he was invited. But right now, I want to answer you. So I don't have time to explain that particular thing. But Mr. W.D. Farad, he said that Islam is freedom, justice, and equality. And he presented himself in America, coming from another land, to the depressed population of Detroit, Michigan. And his message of a new identity for Black people in America was the embrace of freedom, justice, and equality, that is Islam. And his student, who became leader and was the one who built the Nation of Islam, presented himself to the African American people as a representative and leader of the movement for freedom, justice, and equality. For us, and I would say in terms of international recognition, that focus or that emphasis is America, is the beginning of America. And Frederick Douglass, his entire ministry, if we can put it like that, or mission, was to represent the human claims of an oppressed population, and that he himself was an embodiment of the internal conflict and the hypocrisy, that he was not necessarily to be regarded as extraordinary in his ability and talents to represent this concern, but he was presenting himself as what is in the essential makeup of this oppressed population. And that if America did not acknowledge what is essential in the claim of this oppressed population, that it would have no existence, no continued existence. That freedom, justice, and equality as a claim in the American character must be also an endowment of every citizen. And the inspired language of Frederick Douglass really was, in my estimation, um, a hope, and just for lack of a better term, the most comprehensive term that I can think of now is salvation for America, which in the topic that I gave for this address, the commencement of America, which means a conclusion as to what is the purpose and a beginning. And the aim for the tools that support human progress of freedom and equality is to form and sustain the just order, a just reality, a just system. And this is not just an ambition, this is in the nature of human beings for establishment. There has to be language and emphasis formed within the conscience of people to bring this about. And in the tradition of Frederick Douglass, we are expressing or speaking in this language and emphasis.
Thank you for that, Brother Imam. Again, as always, we appreciate the time that you take to join us for these conversations. We want to remind everyone that the first Sunday of every month, Imam Earl Abdulmalik Mohammed gives a public address, or first Sunday address, as it's called in our tradition. Here in this setting, you can watch it live on YouTube as well as Facebook this first Sunday of every month at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I started with Pacific Standard Time because I'm on the West Coast, so that's what came to my mind first. Again, we want to remind everyone of the program that we have coming up in July that the Imam just spoke to, the Independence Day address. We look forward to seeing you there live, as well as other programs that we have planned throughout the year, which we invite you to visit eanspeaks.com or muslimamericanministry.com to get more information on with regard to those events, as well as other activities that we have planned. Again, Brother Imam, thank you. And we greet you, our audience, with the Muslim greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum.